So a lot of relationship topics and information have been coming across my timeline recently. The algorithm is funny. You see something and you like it, or you add it to your story, and all of a sudden they flood your timeline like that's the only thing that you're thinking about, and it kind of shades the canvas a bit. Whether you agree with the things that you're seeing or not, they just kind of put stuff out there that seems like it's adjacent to whatever it was that you were looking at. And there was something in particular that I was watching, and I rarely get in the comments. I rarely, do any replies or anything like that. But this one, as is the tendency for me on this podcast, is just to hear certain conversations and see the misuse or the conflation of certain terminology, and just kind of like, okay, listen, sometimes these things are well-intentioned and they actually may be related, but they, in all honesty, create the problems that they're actually trying to prevent. In this clip that I was watching, there was a therapist. I don't know if it was a relationship therapist specifically, but they were speaking about relationships, and they were talking about accountability, which I think is a paramount in life or any type of relationship. It's just super important for there to be accountability on all sides. Now, in this clip, the individual that was speaking basically was saying that if there is a transgression between two people, that accountability is not just acknowledging your participation or acknowledging your guilt or apologizing for that transgression, but it's also your actions of making a change to ensure that that transgression doesn't happen again. And I had to respond, because it's just not true. And I understand contextually why someone would want to make that statement, right? Because along with someone taking accountability for whatever it is that happened, you would want that to be accompanied by some type of plan of action, corrective plan of action, to where the accountability is not the only thing that is coming from that person. Because you could do a million things wrong and own up to a million of them, 100%. But if there is no changed behavior, if you continue to transgress in the same manner, being accountable doesn't really fix the problem. It doesn't correct the transgression. It doesn't ensure that I'm not, that person is not violated again. So again, you definitely want a plan of action to come along with accountability, but it's not a part of being accountable. And the reason why that practice is dangerous is because it's very important to be specific and to be accurate with the terminology that you're using, and to ensure that you're placing the right amount of responsibility or the correct action to the words that you're requesting. Like, if you're requesting accountability, it's important that you define accountability correctly. And if you're asking for a plan of action, that you define what that means to have a plan of action, to actually change behavior. When you bring those two terms together, it creates a breeding ground for presumption, for a possible misinterpretation or misunderstanding about what's actually required. Because sometimes taking accountability, yes, I need to acknowledge that I'm responsible for that situation, but there may not be a plan of action required, because what I'm accountable for may be a part of a boundary that I've set, and it's not my position to actually change what's happening. If my boundary offends you, yes, I can take accountability for having a boundary, but it's not my behavior that needs to be changed. And if you think because being accountable means that I need to have a plan of action to go along with that accountability to change your outlook on what I'm taking responsibility for, it just creates a false narrative. It's a confusing thought process, and it can create an environment or a structure where people are being asked to do things that are counterintuitive to the actual situation. And it's just simple. I just went to the internet and looked up the definition of accountability, and nowhere in that definition of accountability did it say anything about having a plan of action to correct what you're claiming to be accountable for. Accountability is that's just not what accountability is. I mean, and it was pretty simple, but again, like I said, the merging of those two makes perfect sense. There's nothing illogical about what was being said. It just wasn't correct. And I think in a relationship, defining these words, like being specific and being accurate, so you can actually communicate in a very functional way without a lot of presumption and a lot of, you can add a lot of sauce on the things and make a lot of these concepts way more complex than they really need to be, instead of actually being specific, using the correct terminology and the definition of those terminologies, and speaking in a manner that clearly communicates what it is that you need and what it is that what you need to do, what you need to communicate, what you need from a partner, what you need communicated to you from your partner. It's important. The accuracy of our communication is important. And I think that's something that's missed a lot, which to me seems very ironic when what we're looking for is effective communication. And I think accuracy in that communication is probably the number one thing outside of allowing a safe space to communicate, is important. And I also want to touch on something I just brought up, which is, helping to create a safe space to communicate. I think that, especially in my own, I'm going to speak about me, especially in my own life, it's very easy to look at the people that you're actually speaking to, look at the people that you're actually having these relationships with, and to focus on what you believe that person is or is not doing to help foster that place where you can safely speak and communicate whatever it is that's on your mind. And that's an easy thing to do, right? I think very rarely are we tuned into or trained to look within first and then look outside. We're almost, and I don't know if it's a Western civilization type of thing, where we're taught to prepare for what is outside of us, what we observe to be outside of us, whether it's positive or negative to our being. We're taught to embrace the good things and keep away the bad things, or embrace the bad things to train our bodies to be tougher, or train our minds to be tougher, or train our being more emotionally strong or structured, to endure these things, when I believe in all actuality, if we start from within, if we master ourselves within in the most honest and complete way that we can, I think it allows us to address and prepare and deal with what may come along in the most beneficial way to our being specifically that we can. So when you're speaking about creating a safe space, it feels and it almost it's quite apparent that initially, instead of looking at what others are doing to promote or detract from there being a space that's safe to to communicate, looking at what you're doing or looking at what I'm doing to promote and create that safe space for another person and for myself is probably a much more effective way to address that situation. One, because it's the only thing that you can control. Like I can communicate to another person that I don't feel safe telling you how I really feel, but I can't make them do the things that make me feel safe. I can only voice that I don't feel safe and why I don't feel safe. But I think what's more important is, one, creating a safe space where you can communicate honestly with yourself. There are so many things that we are conditioned to see as positive or negative, attractive or detracting. We're constantly trying to alter ourselves to make ourselves more marketable for whatever it is that we're trying to attract. And then, you have people who are saying, like, just be exactly who you are and, what you're supposed to have. You will attract what it is that you're supposed to have if you focus on being your most authentic self. And I believe that's true. But I also believe that before that, you have to determine what your most authentic self is. You have to know yourself enough. You have to believe in yourself enough in the moment to actually accurately define yourself for yourself. And I think that's something that it takes time to do, especially if that's not what you've been exposed to or even been shown to do in life. And I just don't think that that's a Western way of thinking. We just don't think that way. We don't spend a lot of time sitting with ourselves and actually trying to figure out who and what we are. It's all about figuring out what we want to do, what's going to bring us the perceived or the packaged image of success. And honestly, it's a big marketing scheme. We're marketing ourselves for life. We're marketing ourselves to get a good job. We're marketing ourselves to get into college. We're marketing ourselves to get a good partner. We're marketing ourselves to basically seem worthy of these external entities that are supposed to make us feel great internally. And I challenge that by saying I need to feel great internally without any of these things in my life. And then when I feel great internally and how I manifest my own destiny within me, the things that I see for myself, then I can have discernment and be able to make accurate judgments on the things that are actually going to promote my growth, my well-being, my safety, those things, and then what things are going to detract. And it's very nuanced, right? Because, you can go the other way with this thing and feel like you're doing it the same way, but you're really not. It is very different to sit and go inside yourself and say, this is what I really want. And really determine if this is what I want because it validates me with my peers or with my family or with the idea of what a man or a woman should be in this society. Like, there's all these examples and these pictures that are supposed to define us and tell us what we are and aren't supposed to be, and it's just not real. People spend their whole lives trying to be something that they think they're supposed to be until they run out of the stamina that it takes to do that, and then either they die or they continue on and just are really just existing. They're not really living, or they give up the facade and actually take the time and say, no, this is not what I want. This is what I really want. Like, they've actually been collecting little Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs on what they actually love about themselves and what they love about their own being and what they want to put their energy into. And then when they finish this manufactured journey for the masses, then they start to live for themselves. And it's sad, and I mean, I guess it's not sad. I guess it's necessary for people to see these examples, but I wish, and I try to, as a part of my legacy, give to my people a different thought process. Like, my children, the mothers of my children that I communicate with, when we have conversation, the way that I'm living my life, I don't want anybody to copy what I'm doing, except for in spirit. I want all of them to realize that you can paint yourself into a life that you don't really want to leave simply from the choices that you make based on things that you don't actually really want. Sometimes it's humbling for a person to have very simple desires. And it's like you don't feel like your dreams are big enough. You don't feel like what you want out of your life is big enough. You don't feel like anyone would want a person who thinks the way that you do. And that's the thing. Like, you have to create a safe space for yourself first. No one will know what's a safe space for you unless they see that you exude that. And it's its own filter. Once you've created a safe space for you to speak kindly and honestly with yourself, then you'll know when a person has helped foster that for you to speak to them. A lot of people don't know what it looks like, so they just kind of make general statements about, I don't feel safe. Well, how would you feel safe speaking to someone else when you don't even feel safe speaking to yourself? When you're not even honest with who you are and what you feel as a person, how can you expect for someone else to have that for you? And trust me, I've been in situations with people who genuinely want me to open up, but because I was scared to actually accept myself for who I am. And this is coming from a person who has a lot of interests who grew up in a lot of circles, was always authentic, but never felt like I belonged to one thing. And so I felt kind of like a nomad socially. I was an athlete, but then I also had a group of intellectual friends. I grew up around people, African American people, but because I was, in different environments in school, that wasn't the only social group that I had were black people. It was Hispanics, it was white, it was Asian, it was whatever I was into, whoever was there, I was around them. And I generally get along with people who get along with me, as long as it's respectful. So my palette was wide. I didn't have one style that I was beholden to. I loved it all. And I wanted to be able to participate in a real way based off what I liked. I don't want to be around people, and I'm listening to a certain type of music. I love hip hop. I'm a b-boy, so I break dance and all that stuff. But because I don't talk like them, then I'm not black enough to be around them. And then when I go around my other friends and I speak away because this is also a part of me culturally, then they're like looking at me funny because how can you be here at this gifted and talented program, or how are you at the science fair doing a science project and you're speaking like this isn't the club, or this isn't, in elementary school, this is not the hip hop, it's not the breakdance cipher, this thing, you know what I'm saying? And it's not like I didn't personify any of those stereotypes. It's just who I am. And for a long time, I didn't feel comfortable with who I was. Like, I wanted to just belong somewhere because it was easier to identify as one thing. But that one thing for me is me. I am not a monolith, but I am my own person, and I define myself. And once I created a safe space for myself, I knew how to discern what a safe space with another person was. And I also could understand if I was contributing to a safe space for my partner to speak as well. And I think that's similar to what this person was speaking about, was just basically saying that we should start looking inward to see what our contribution is to safe, productive communication before we judge the level of communication or the level of safety that another person has created for us. It starts within. It starts with us. We have to initiate that process. And a lot of times it's not initiated within a relationship outside of us. It's basically giving ourselves the authority to be ourselves. And, really accepting who you are as a person, and not in a way where I have to be better than anyone else to be me, but that being me is plenty good enough in any circle. And any circle that I'm not good enough is just because they're not okay with it. And that's fine. It's their prerogative. It doesn't have to be a competition. It doesn't have to be toxic. It doesn't have to be like, yo, if you're not fucking with me, then you ain't about shit. Like, that's a crazy, arrogant take. Like, everything isn't for everyone. That's why there's discernment. That's why there's delineation. That's why there's a choice. And we have to honor and respect that and stop using this psychology, these phrases and terms to try to actually pigeonhole people into points of view and perspectives, because it's confusing. It's very disingenuous, and it doesn't create a healthier society. It creates a space where even in the ideology of being safe and valuing mental health and all of those things, that you can't even trust that stuff because it's being used to manipulate you. Like, I'm gonna make you think that shit's crazy, or make you think that you're crazy, so you follow and do what I want you to do. Like, that's absolutely insidious. It's the most corrupt usage of any type of therapeutic, helpful information possible. Instead of actually being accurate with your terminology, with your usage, instead of actually trying to help people, it's simply another way to push agenda, personal agenda, to monetize and basically take advantage of those who are not yet well versed, in self-actualization. Like, they don't know, and they're looking for guidance, and they're being misled. And that's why ultimately my movement, or my purpose, I feel, or what I'm trying to do with this podcast is simply that, is to bring about and show like how the truth and how being accurate in your personification of that and your presentation of said truth is important, because people are looking at what you're doing, people who have less knowledge, and they're being led astray. And it's just a horrible thing, because you have a few that are aware, educated, or at least experienced, and then you have those who are introductory. They're beginners, they're amateurs, they're people who are still trying to find their way, and they're being led astray. Sometimes unintentionally, and sometimes with purpose. But either way, it's still dangerous. It's still hazardous. It's still damaging in a way that sometimes there's no recovery, because of the stakes, because of the arena that you're actually playing this out in. It's difficult to come back from some of the misinformation that's being put out there because of where it's being planted at. It caused more damage to pull it up and replant something new than to not have put anything there in the first place. So, again, I think it's very important to be clear, to be accurate in your communication, and then to start from a place of within and work your way out when you're trying to create accuracy and safety in communication. Start with that for yourself. That way you can understand what it looks like with others. Again, this is the Truth Lies Here podcast. Look me up, follow me on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.